If you have a penchant for self-psychological torture media like me, then you have probably come across the works of Satoshi Kon before. For me, it was around this time last year actually when I watched Perfect Blue, which I consider to be both technically and thematically the greatest movie I have ever seen. The concept itself is the perfect one for watchable media, as we witness a movie with no clear internal fiction versus internal reality, experiencing exactly what the main character Mima herself feels. Every aspect of the movie feeds into this core principle, providing the most genuine unease that could keep even a horror fanatic in suspense. Then, a few months ago, I moved on to Paranoia Agent, a 12-episode series but similar in many ways. This time we witness an entire city begin to lose themselves in fiction, as it's a story more intertwined with how such a thing spreads. The way our own rejection of reality can change the world is presented heavily in every single character, from random people on the street to the wide and varied cast. So when I recently decided to check out Paprika, the movie which had an inspirational hand in Inception, I was of course expecting something along those lines. And needless to say, when you have a character described as a terrorist within dreams, you get some blurring of the fictional line. The movie centers around the DC Mini, a revolutionary invention which allows dreams to be recorded and, more importantly, interacted with, which the research team behind the device believes will lead to a revolution in therapy practices. While Takita, the genius who easily crafted it, might be unfocused on that goal in his childish and impulsive ways, Chiba, the therapist who works with the device, keeps things on track tirelessly and dryly. That is, until a theft of the so far produced 3 devices and their subsequent misuse begins to break down the barrier between the dreams they explore and the reality they are supposed to return to. One dream of a nonsensical parade begins consuming others as it's planted in the researchers' and others' heads while they're fully awake, to the point they can be led into real-world danger through simple obstacles within dreams. The more and more people are exposed, the worse and worse this breakdown becomes, until the entire city is consumed in nonsensical speeches and incomprehensible images, with people turning into their dreams on the spot. But in this nonsense, we find what sets this breakdown in reality apart from how Kon presented it in works like Perfect Blue and Paranoia Agent, where the former is literal in fiction versus reality with a plot about an actor, and the later shows how fiction spreads like a disease. Paprika instead plays to the double meaning of its brand of fiction: dreams. When you see all of the nonsense, it's easy to think of it as just the oddities of a dream. We've all woken up before thinking, now what the hell was that, after a dream which feels like it couldn't possibly have come from a sane mind. A man flying into the Tarzan movie, or a researcher surrounded by dolls and a parade of fridges and frogs and, well, just everything. It's just a spillover of weird images from the subconscious. After all, dreams are an odd thing we don't quite understand. But dreams, on the other hand, well, we all know what dreams are. That is, dreams not in the sense of what happens when we sleep, but what happens when we wish for unrealistic goals, a state of reality which doesn't exist but that we hope one day will. In Paprika, a dream means both of these things. We see this in how every odd bit of imagery is in some way related to the desires of a character. There are young girls who want to stay young to fit in beauty standards, the creepy older men who make those standards desiring to capture it, people who want or need money turning into symbols of good fortune, and those who want status with big heads climbing to the top of the pile. There are people who just want to consume everything for pleasure, or who want to be surrounded by the dolls they make for themselves at home. Everything from the generic to the specific is presented here. Everything we see in this parade and the other dreams, like amusement parks from a better time in someone's past, to a constant stream of famous movies, are dreams about dreams. Subconscious processing of conscious desires. So when we begin to dig deeper into Paprika, we can see another interesting look at not just fiction, or not just the spread of fiction, but at what our personal fiction detached from all boundaries is, how it can either destroy us, maintain us, or change the entire world. The villain of the films are given away at the beginning with a simple line. When the DC minis are stolen, Chiba, Tokita, and Chief Shima discuss the next steps and suspect that it's an internal job. The remaining named members of the staff are Inui, the chairman, and Osanai, a fellow researcher who's jealous of the others' more impressive skills. They only mask their involvement by using the persona of a disgruntled former colleague as cover. The first of this evil pair has grand ambitions, and the latter assists him in order to achieve his own smaller desires, but both seek to break down the line between dreams and reality to get what they want. The chairman sees dreams as a holy thing which the prying hands of man should be kept away from. He constantly says things like,
深遠な夢の前にあっては科学などゴミに等しいのかもしれん
to express this feeling. The reason is really quite simple. He has a dream which is at odds with reality, the fact-based fields of science and medicine. He wants to, in his words, heal all deficits, including his own inability to walk. In the breakdown between worlds, he does achieve this, exclaiming about his newfound ability to walk on his own legs, proving this really quite simple motivation. He refuses a mucking about in dreams despite doing so himself because he doesn't want them used to make reality more bearable, which is the point of therapy. He simply wants them to become real. A half measure like therapy only reminds one that these things aren't real to try and come to terms with it, try and present them how they could be satisfied in other ways. But he refuses any other satisfaction. This sort of closed-mindedness begins to show how a man who just wanted something positive which couldn't be real, because really what he wants is positive, how someone like that becomes a villain bent on making the world itself his plaything in service of this. Of course, part of it is something we've discussed before, the danger of being obsessive over one goal or idea. One begins to exclude all of the things to protect that one obsession. He decrees his own field of research into something new and innovative, saying that science, that which presumably built his life to what it is now, is nothing exactly because he lives for this dream. He couldn't live with the boundaries of possible and impossible which define such things, and so the options when research progresses against his goals achievable and towards his compromise are to either stop living, since living to him has become the same as achieving this dream, or to become more drastic and making it real, cut out even more to see it achieved. Of course, the latter is what occurs, as he claims himself to be a sacred and chosen protector over dreams, fighting for all those who seek to escape an inhumane world.
夢たちはおののいているのだって安住の地が奪われてしまう
While his originally simple motivations grow into something much more complex, we see that occurs because it's expressing something complex, that we have to reconcile further how such a thing should lead to evil. It's obsessive, but a simple dream to move on one's 2 feet. How does world domination come from such a dream? In many ways, he's a character who's right. I don't think any of us would argue that reality can be harsh enough to drive people out of it to escapist measures. He's correct on more fronts as well about the dangers of science. The reason all of these actions which destroy the world are possible is because an uncontrolled genius made an ultra-powerful and easily abusable device, and the rest of the researchers tried to have the benefits of such a thing which wasn't truly ready, as he never implemented safety features. The ambitions of science are often at odds with its amorality. Only our intent determines the difference between technological heaven and hell, and nothing more. Good enough isn't acceptable for protections on science. So with this, we see that, of course, he's right on some fronts. He's not a completely unreasonable person, so how does that become evil? Well, we start to see it in the fact that the one who actually abuses that fact of science the worst is the chairman, despite espousing hatred for such things. Of course, this is a little bit of hypocrisy, if not outright madness, but in his mind, lost in this kind of obsession, he is simply doing what he feels is right for all those lost to reality. What we find then is that the issue with his dream becoming a reality, even if it should not have been harmful, might be that any dream being forced into a reality not yet ready for it is harmful, and inherently about power and control. Merging a dream with reality, whatever the circumstances, must be about these things. First of all, dreams are not reality for reasons. In little retreats within our own minds, away from the ability to harm other people, of course we escape, building internal worlds which prop up the external self and forcing it onwards into reality by relieving the stress of reality. They are self-centered butcherings of reality. Yes, even if they are simply the mind processing our memories, they are our memories, our perception of the world as the main character. They are inherently self-centered. And so, for one's absolute and unfettered dream to become real is to say that reality should cater to one. And in the other sense of the word dream, they are still a one-sided escape. They are what we wish for, not what we can make happen overnight. They are usually not reality because they are not, at least in short terms, realistic. If they could be achieved in an immediately realistic way, then they wouldn't be dreams in the first place, would they? To say that one's dream should be real is to say that one's desires, even when unbounded, come first and above all others who themselves rely on their own dreams and as such go unfulfilled. The issue is compounded more then. For every dream which comes true, there are many more which cannot. If only one person is an artist, then the world suffers from aggressive blandness, but if everyone is an artist, then no one needs the art of the others and it begins to lack some value. The worth of all things is gained in perspective and limitation. Being ahead of that limitation is to have power and control, and their offshoots called fame and other names. Only so many can have so much of them at once, and so our ability to fulfill most desires is always held back. Even more, the world itself is a conglomeration of everyone's dreams, some more prominent than others, but shaped by all. We all push for what we want the world to be, shaping what is allowed power and control, even if some do so more readily by already owning such things. When this is what reality is, a mixture of dreams being sought in many ways, pushing anyone's personal dream is inherently pushing away those of others. This means that even good, well-intentioned, or deeply personal dreams, when forced, can easily become something of evil, embodying the hands of power and control. What we see in the parade is one way of how this can occur, by abusing everything we just discussed, convincing everyone that the dream of one will provide their own. They begin to shape reality as the one providing it sees fit, affording that person control. The parade is grand and excessive, a melange of everything that many people desire, somehow all contained in one. They're able to turn into what they want, seeing this as the fulfillment of their own lives. And for some time, it is. They do achieve what they want, whether it's dolls or excessive consumption. But the trick is that, well, it's a trick. They're only being led to think this is the end goal they've sought, to let their guards down and lend someone else their power, since that ruler's benevolence made reality into fiction. It's like someone lending out money to make the small goals of others come true and charging interest, of course. While they're pushing others towards what they want, it's only to get enough resources to be able to then pull the rug out and do as they wish, to have so much money taken out of the total that others need loans to begin with. We see this best with the chairman's right-hand man, Osanai. When Paprika uncovers what's behind the parade, that it's just a front for the evil pair's desires, we see a statue of Osanai towering in the back before she's then captured by him. Alone in his space within this dream, he reveals his love for her, that he accepted giving up his body to the chairman in order to have this. Since he believed he could never be as good as the others, he gave up on working on his reality to instead chase wildly at fiction, same as the chairman consumed by what could not be. He rips Chiba from Paprika, but just as he moves to take her, the chairman appears from his form and attempts to kill her, finally revealing the pull of the rug. It's only a logical conclusion. Osanai gave up his power to someone else and was somehow convinced that that would make him more powerful, but such a thing is clearly false. Giving oneself to the dream of another can never do this. He's just another pawn abused for one man's power, a dreamer convinced to dig deeper into desiring a world which could never be real. In that state, one only loses sight of reality, only becomes more likely to give their power to someone else, to fulfilling one corrupted, bastardized collective dream, and the entire game is lost. Part of why this parade is able to spread and grow is exactly because of this. Desire is an easy thing to manipulate. Dreams are so great that the promise of their achievement makes one lose sight of all else, including obvious tricks. Look at all the participants in this song and dance. They follow along with the nonsense, never once questioning that which clearly makes no sense. More and more do so, it becomes more and more normalized, the time before the pull of the rug looks more and more appealing to all, and holding back becomes less and less realistic. Things snowball out of control into the most personal and deepest held parts of ourselves. The dreams which inspire us onwards are nothing more than the power of another, enforcing their control and homogeneity. I think we have to consider such things when we analyze Paprika, because that titular character, the dream version of Chiba, is described as a terrorist by the one seeking to dominate reality, and yet she is one half of the hero saving the day. She is the one who's looking into the actual dreams of actual people, helping them understand how to achieve enough of their desires. Not spreading the idea that this one dream is what will make their life complete, not telling them to give up on reality that we all need. It isn't terrorism, but more like a dissent, a fight against an oppressive force. Think about it. If everyone is working to make one dream they were told we desire into reality, who's really benefiting from that? Who profits from the common needs of a collective dream? This is coming from a perspective a world away from those who wrote the movie, and more so than any other time, we have to acknowledge that fact. But I think it's still within the logic of the movie to think of this collective dream as something like, not necessarily the American dream, but like the American dream. This kind of archetype that people are told will bring what happiness is. Is something like this really a dream, really the thing within us that we desire to be fulfilled, or is it just a dream of another that we support without knowing it, buying, quite literally buying in America, into false ecstasy? I know many people taking this path, but I know very few truly happy people taking it. I just want to raise the possibility that maybe there's a reason for that. There is a danger in forcing dreams into reality, but there's also a danger in the homogeneity of dreams, because when something is predictable, it is profitable. If everyone needs the same thing to achieve the dream, then someone is inherently going to achieve a greater desire through the power selling that thing affords them from the control of the supply they stole. Part of what we need to keep in mind is that chasing things, the ones we truly desire, is part of avoiding this great evil. When we begin to accept what we're told is a great dream, but is in fact just what one provides for their dream, we join the parade, we lose sight of our collective abuse. Always having a dream true to oneself is an awareness against this, and a diversity that we desperately need. So what is different with our heroes then? If the villains are the people who merge dreams into reality, what do the heroes do with dreams? Well, they are the ones struggling with that balance of the thing which isn't reality but sustains us to deal with reality. In their own ways, both of them split their desires rather than merging them. First up is a character we've yet to mention, Konakawa, a detective struggling with a homicide case whose friend Shima refers him to a new dream-entering therapy to try and fix the mental block causing his issues. There he meets Paprika, the alter ego of Chiba, who's much less controlled than her other half. Together they explore his dreams and uncover a mishmash of famous movies, which always ends with the victim in his case dying before his eyes in a hallway. In these dreams, he's very often facing himself in a quite literal and disturbing way, as different people bear his face and chase after him as if they're about to tear him limb from limb. This culminates in eventually seeing himself as the victim of the case, shot by himself on the other side. What we learn as things progress is that he was once a filmmaker in his younger days, bringing an independent crime drama almost to completion with his great friend, of course with almost being the key word. He loses confidence as they continue, and the final scene remains undetermined, The main character of their film has to decide if he'll shoot his former friend turned lawbreaker he's now chasing, or let him go based on their past.
俺はとても追いつけなかった。悔しいと思わないことが悔しかったくらいだ。
Never believing himself to be good enough, Konakawa leaves his love of movies behind to seek out something more realistic, where he becomes a detective instead of playing one. He still has a deep love for film, as he expresses specific techniques to Paprika, and of course in how his dreams are all about movies. He can't deny that deep down this is a huge part of him, yet he has convinced himself to hate movies, saying that they just aren't his thing, and refusing to see or even think about them. In his lack of confidence, he sealed this part of himself away, seeing it as a dream which could never become reality. But this is what prevents him from solving the case. This dream is a part of him, as dreams are for anyone. There's no way to simply kill them off, no cold turkey quitting that removes all ties they have on us. To say that we could give up on the things which drive us forward in an instant is foolish. They are tied to who we have become. What we can do is come to terms with their loss or their changes, but rejecting them outright and claiming they are or never were a part of us doesn't move us forward, even if we think it's more realistic. Because that means that the energy which should go to moving forward is instead spent on holding a part of oneself back. Saying it's dead without addressing it means it's still within us, out of sight but always in mind, as we see with the filmmaker brought out of him in his subconscious. Each time he says he hates movies, each time they excitedly pop into his mind, like calling Paprika a dream movie star only to depress himself, he's fighting the same battle he started at 17, not the ones he faces right now. That's a lot of energy going into something worthless, isn't it? And kept in hiding, these selves only grow independent of us, becoming more and more exaggerated in the characteristics we tried to kill. They push harder and harder to try and force their way out, reciprocating all they receive in due force. When Paprika and Konakawa uncover this self within him, it's kind of like the stereotypical filmmaker. It's a man in an odd hat, a sport jacket, and plain black shirt, desiring to capture the attention of a beautiful woman with his advanced knowledge of film. Kept inside, it's like this dream didn't die, but rather, for him it became a more consuming fantasy, slowly overtaking his consciousness, much more exaggerated, and everything he felt was unrealistic to begin with. And whether we recognize these internal selves and desire or not, they will impact who we are more than just stealing our energy. In another way, it did influence his character, even though he never saw it for what it was. The fact that he was creating a crime drama where he played the detective, and that he became a detective is of course no coincidence. He was living a part of that dream the entire time. He never actually gave up on it, it's just that instead of trying to force it all into reality, he took a small part of it and made it real. He isn't telling all the vivid and varied stories a creator wishes to tell, but he is at least living one of the stories he would have told. As the vision of his film partner friend who passes says to him, his life doesn't actually change after the main conflict is resolved, it remains pretty much as it was. He's still the detective, still in the same place, still with the same old friends. And that's because his life didn't really need to change. It wasn't unhealthy or wrong for him, it was just being held back by a lack of knowledge and acceptance because he never got closure on the chapter of his youth. He was fighting so hard to deny it that he felt even just watching one movie would break his spirits, and yet he was expressing a part of it the entire time. Nothing changes because nothing changed. He just accepted the life he made for what it was. A part of his dream made true in a way that didn't need excessive power or control. All of this is expressed in how his dream is resolved, which is also how he saves Paprika when she's captured, which is also his part in saving the world. All he does is finish the film he started at 17, making the final call he never felt himself worthy to do so. He takes the shot, putting a definitive end to the tale he wanted to tell, and allowing the one he's living to finally progress again. He got closure and allowed himself to move on and see reality as more than just an outright rejection of fiction, that actually the two are of course intertwined. Without one, the other has no purpose, no value. There should be some reward in all of this, though. I mean, he did step up and take part in saving the world, and that deserves something, right? Well, doing that in itself was kind of the reward because of how he did it. It's almost funny how indulgent the end of his dream is, with what starts as, this innovative, weird, artsy crime drama ending as, well, the corniest action movie of all time, where the hero blows smoke from his gun and kisses the beautiful woman he just saved. For someone who denied any love of film for the longest time and shows a respect for more nuanced takes, this is quite a bit. But that fits. This is part of the solution to how limited the space for dreams to become real is. If we can't make them permanent, then when they do come to be, as long as it's not hurting someone else, who cares how self-indulgent it is? He stepped up when his time to be the hero came, and since he played the part, he should get to play the part in full before stepping down again to make room for the next hero. A dream is already such a wonderful fiction. When the time for it comes, don't skimp. You never know when the next will arrive. But we also have to remember that even with that fact, some dreams do have to stay as dreams. We see this in another, more unrealistic desire he held, which is, of course, Paprika. He became infatuated with her after she assisted his dreams, enraptured by her personality and attitude. He feels like a much younger, more inexperienced man around her, rushing to the door to ask when he can see her again, and she's the one with all the control, just handing him a card. She is the most literal manic pixie dream, after all. A man upset with reality as he was can easily fall for such a thing. He waits around in an internet bar for her all night, hoping for even a single glance like the few minutes she gave him last time before running out. Strung along, he accepts anyway. She is described only as a woman of dreams, because that's what she is, an unrealistic fantasy that we covered heavily before in the Manic Pixie Nightmare. The desire for a beautiful woman to spice up boring life, a quite literal note of her name. Maybe in her, he felt all those unfulfilled years would shift into something exciting finally. But it's clear they could never mix. She's a flirtatious force of nature, moving from person to person, place to place, young and full of energy, against a man showing his age. He may dream of something like this, but it's clear that it can't be reality. We see what happens when one tries to force it as Osanai did, only becoming consumed by what he couldn't have. He wanted, and wanted beyond his ability, and so intent on those wants he never grew to be worthy of them. Instead, he tried to bring them down to his level. When something is beyond our reach, the only healthy option is not to bring it closer, but to grow our own wingspan. And if it's still beyond that, then, well, it just has to stay as fiction. And so, Konakawa and Shima alike accept this about the long-gone Paprika at the end of the film, once she saved the day. They each know it's just a fantasy for old men like them, and trying to make it real would do nothing beneficial. They would only miss what they could have by wishing for something they couldn't. But as we keep saying, these grand fictions maintain reality, so when they can't become real, what's wrong with them being a little unrealistic fantasy? Reality is often harsh, as the chairman rightfully said, and people need some kind of escape to keep up with that. If the world can be unrealistically harsh, then we need some kind of counterbalance. So we escape for a little bit into outlandish dreams to accept reality, fictional worlds which exaggerate our conditions and desires to drive us forward. We can't have the girl that's so perfect we dream of, but we can dream, can't we? After all, that dream will show us what we value more in its exaggeration, and so how we can make parts of it real in a healthy way. We know what we want better by seeing its logical extremes. It makes our desire more obvious and understandable in the same way a story presents themes in exaggeration. So a bit of fiction is important to maintain reality. Konakawa knows as much when he goes to see a film as the final scene of the movie. We can't force dreams to merge with reality for the sake of ourselves and everyone. But an hour or two of dreaming here and there, there's no reason to reject that like he did. Without dreams, we're only held back. In the other hero, Chiba, we see a different kind of rejection, setting her once aside as she split into her two sides. Herself, the serious woman who gets business things done when they need to be done, the adult surrounded by children, and Paprika, the outgoing, flirtatious, manipulative woman of dreams. Chiba is so serious about what she does, in fact, that she stops having dreams of her own because she's so focused on the dreams of others. The most realist of the bunch, she simply doesn't have the space for fiction anymore. And it's hard to blame her when she's trying to control a department rife with jealousy, childishness, and a chairman who turns out to be comical levels of evil in his plotting. If you're only ever handling the desire of others, and so much so, you're going to lose your own. And so these desires are all funneled into Paprika, who, much like Konakawa's filmmaker, also embodies some of the exaggerated negative aspects of this repressed excess. She's helping in the dreams of others, of course, and being someone who's fun and flirtatious isn't an issue in any way. But she's also described as manipulative, and there's truth to that. She's drawing people like Konakawa in, playing their attention, and then leaving them out to dry to chase something she finds more interesting in that moment. Whenever she assists in dreams, it's always so seductive, laying across them and speaking in breathy tones, leaning forward with all attention on you just before she pulls it away so suddenly. This is because Paprika is all the desires that Chiba doesn't or can't allow herself to act on, so they overflow in these indulgent moments when they have their only outlet. It's like weeks worth of her wants have to spill out in just a few hours. Where the villains try to control reality with their dreams, she tries to control her dreams with reality. We see that when the barrier begins to break down and Paprika appears without her consent, she's angry, claiming that her alter should listen because she's simply a part of her. She outright says, but Paprika responds the same way she did when Osanai said almost the exact same thing, using someone else as a part of his forceful desire, which draws the comparison to both villains at the same time. While Chiba isn't trying to control reality as they did, she is still exercising an unhealthy amount of control just over herself, and control is a hallmark of their plans. So naturally, learning this lesson from herself, something she knew deep down but felt was less important than total realism all along, her moment of saving the day is one where she finally accepts her desires rather than pushing them away. It turns out, Chiba is in love with Tokita, despite finding him childish and insufferable at times in that she likes the fun that it brings into things. She wishes it would be lessened in its extremes, but likes some aspect of his unabashed desire chasing, how true to himself he is without filter. In a somewhat logical way, they are a realistic pairing. He's a man with no limitations whatsoever, always engaging in excess, doing only what he's interested in rather than doing the work he's supposed to do. Part of the disaster is because he never bothered to implement access features in the DC Mini, it wasn't interesting to him. She acts as a limiter on that, going so far as to scold him and toss his work away whenever his childishness reaches its worst. Knowing entirely too well how to control her desires, they form a pair of opposites which benefit from the other. She accepts the detriment she can handle for the benefits that she likes, a small part of fiction made real with those trade-offs. While I do hate the general idea of man without control never learns it, instead woman does so, there is a logic to their cases. It is a very realistic kind of love, not one of dream women, but of two people who know their faults and who fill in those faults for each other. And at the same time, chasing that love is also an acceptance of Paprika, allowing her to even move forward to chase that desire to begin with. Facing down the end of the world, she and Paprika swap places for a moment, silently expressing that each has learned from the other. Chiba chases after Tokita instead of the chairman, seeking to save what she wants as her alter ego normally would, and that alter ego chases down the chairman in her stead, the more realistic and responsible path of the two. Paprika doesn't want someone like Tokita, she wants the kind of men who dream of her to toy with, leaving them waiting in bars all night. But Chiba, in her realistic desires, does want him. She wants someone she can have. And so she goes after it, seeing that one can't keep such things pushed away forever, as an endless responsibility drains us and makes us unable to perform our duties to begin with, and that to constantly help with the dreams of others is to stop dreaming oneself. She takes the traits of Paprika, which when exaggerated are negative, and tempers them with her usual dryness to make them expressed in a much more positive way, a point where dreams meet reality in a healthy way. Just like Konakawa, it's a bit of accepting her desires and bringing them into reality, the right selfishness without going too far. Not enough to change the world with power or control, but just enough to maintain herself in reality, to change a very small section of the world that's just her and one other person for the better. That's what we can and should control. Not the entire world, but our worlds, the slices of it that we made and that we deserve as such. And I want to stress one aspect of what we just said, maintaining ourselves for reality. Because we need reality. The world of dreams is unbounded chaos with no order or organization to speak of. It marches down the street and takes over, bringing everything down to ruins as it goes, unmaintained with no one acting in realistic ways. When absolute pleasure is normalized, no one is going to take care of the things making pleasure possible to begin with. If everyone slips into a dream, then that dream just becomes reality and defeats the very purpose. We need reality to dream in the first place, and so just like Konakawa can't be the action hero all the time, we have to do a part in reality. We have to do things we don't want to do and be responsible and at times shelve our desires because we each maintain a piece of reality that makes the others, and as such our own dreams, able to be dreamt. Rather than a bastardization collective dream instituted by one, we have the real world, a collective reality which allows our minds to make their own internal worlds full of desire. It's not the most fulfilling idea, reality, and it can easily be driven by powerful people more than normal ones, but it does make some pretty amazing things possible at times. We will all have our moments as the action hero, and that's something at least. I think that's worth maintaining. And reality slowly changes over time. Forcing a dream to become real does it in a vile way, but as we all push, it slowly morphs into something new, some new reality where maybe your dream is more possible and could even occur naturally. The more we maintain the real world, the more chances we have for it to one day line up with the fiction we desire without ever hurting others for selfishness. We dream for the future in many senses. Of course, Chiba and Paprika get their action hero chance when they defeat the chairman. Naturally, it's in an odd way, exactly what you'd expect from the man behind Paranoia Agent. It happens because Tokita eats Chiba and they become one, as they each express an affection for the other, led by her, as well as the addition of Paprika representing her desires and allowing her to do so. They come together to dream of a child, which directs Tokita's brand of consumption at something which needs consumed. They literally eat away the chairman's dream and save reality in exactly the way their love works. The excessive desires of one tempered and directed by someone much more responsible. It's an act of balancing, as Paprika expresses in listing opposing things. A set of items which require the other to exist, ultimately capped off by the addition of a little spice. Paprika. In a way representative of Kon's works, this is the moment where one of the leading characters expresses the point of the movie to the audience in definitely my favorite way that I'd ever seen him do so. It's about balance. It's two people balancing each other out, dreams and reality balancing each other out, each one somewhat opposed, but also maintaining the other just the same. Escaping one is killing the other, killing itself like a cop solving their own murder. We accept them, we find the comfortable point, taking the best traits of each with the trade-offs to form a better future. And of course with a sprinkling of spice, that being our time as the action hero and just for a moment embracing our most wild desires. Being nothing but responsible or rejecting that part of yourself that dreams will only leave them to fester into something much more exaggerated and dangerous. In the end, Chiba says to Tokita as he mentions a good dream, because this is what they learned, that balance, that her dreams are important too. They are for everyone. We dream to prop up reality so that we can keep dreaming, to keep living in a harsh world, a cycle endless and forever, and we all do it for each other, all at once for ourselves. The trick to all this confusion is simply finding which spice works for you. I say that because one thing which has come up in the background of this video's logic is that diversity in our dreams is key. We say that not everyone can be an artist or art begins to lose its value, but not everyone wants to be an artist. Some of them want to be doctors or therapists, engineers, actors, chefs, sports stars, mothers, fathers, gamblers, writers, gamers. It's true that for each one of these that's achieved professionally, there can be less, but most of them can coexist together. They don't take up the same spaces. The engineer buys the painting from the artist who was inspired by the actor's performance, who was playing the sports star who had a mother and father. These passions are emboldened by the existence of the others, widening the world in an inspiring way. And the more there are, the longer they can last. We don't have to step down as quickly if everyone is chasing such a wide range of goals. Instead of just action heroes, we can have all kinds of heroes, each with longevity. This then shows even further that chasing the common dream or sold as a realistic compromise only does harm. Such a thing makes an easier playing field for control, for one with power to take the dominant needs for their own, to never step down and make the world play by their rules. For them to alter our reality and make meager offerings seem like the wildest of fictions for which we should be grateful. When our desires all fall under the same umbrella, someone like the chairman has a much easier time. Our part in defeating evil, before we even think of being the star, is deciding exactly what kind of star we want to be. Which spice livens things up the most for our palate? Paprika is only one. Which is yours? Yes, that was quite the cheesy ending, but cheese tastes good, so who really gives a shit? Anyway, you can immediately tell when I go off script because I start talking more like a sailor. But I won't make this ramble too long. I'll just say the works of Satoshi Kon are absolutely fantastic. I'm absolutely enjoying the hell out of going through all these works. They're very easy to write about despite being so abstract. There's really something about that moment where they stress reality at the end. At least in these ones that deal with fiction and reality, where the character gives that definitive moment of reality that makes them so not easy to analyze, but so satisfying too, so possible too, when you're really thinking about it. And so I'm definitely going to be covering more of his works in the future. I think for Christmas, I will probably try to do something for Tokyo Godfathers, so keep an eye out for that. Hey, finger guns. I suck at being a YouTuber. But there's important links in the pinned comment, Discord, more importantly, Patreon, where these lovely people above me help me keep making terrible rambling outros for you to fill your eyes with. Anyway, thanks for watching, and sincerely, I hope I'll see you again soon.